some of them virtually. Thank you as well. This is going to be a terrific program, Driving Growth and Managing Risk Through Technology, something that all of us as board members do a lot of thinking about. I want to thank you also, the people here at the Roux Institute at Northeastern University for this phenomenal layout and ability to host us and make us feel so comfortable in this environment and in an environment that's conducive to all of us talking to each other and learning from each other. I have to also thank our chapter sponsors. They keep us going at the National Association of Corporate Directors. And I thank them in particular because their desire to help us reflects their concern about ever increasing knowledge and skill on the part of their organizations and the boards of directors of their organizations. So it's kind of a two-sided thing. They help us and we supply them with the kind of learning that's so important to their management and governance. Now, I've got a list of other thank yous, and I'm going to have to look at my little sheet of paper here so I remember everybody's name. You'll meet them all. The first person I want to talk to, A on the list, Margaret Angel. You're going to hear from her later. And Sam Ramus. Their teams are located here in the Roux, and they've been extraordinarily helpful to us. I'd like to also thank Dan Kolaski, the head of learning. He just did a couple-hour presentation and looks fresh and chipper and going to ask all kind of good questions, right, Dan? Yeah. And Colleen Thibault, did I get that right? Oh, good. Director of Learning, Partnerships. Let me also ask Quincy Hensel from the Portland Chamber of Commerce. Quincy, nice to meet you. They said her, and I'm going, her? Yeah, I can imagine. And especially when Quincy on television, right? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, and now let me turn the program over to Margaret Angel, and who's the head of partnerships and strategic initiatives here at the Roux. And thank her for hosting this event, and thank the Roux for hosting us 3 years in a row. Margaret.
Kathy, thank you. And thank you also to Ellen and to Deb and the whole NACD team. It's an honor for us to be the site of the NACD event every year, and it works really well for what we're trying to establish here in Portland. And so I just wanted to take a couple minutes, and Ellen says a minute, to tell you about who we are and why we open our doors, and hope that this will be we have some familiar faces here, but for many of you that are new to the Roux, we hope this is the first of many times that you come to visit us, and hopefully this is the beginning of a wonderful relationship. And also goes to everybody online, please come visit us in person. The Roux Institute at Northeastern University is a campus of Northeastern. Most of you probably know the Boston campus, but in the last 15 years, we have evolved into being a global university system. We have 14 campuses across the United States, Canada, and London. We have 45,000 students. We're one of the fastest growing R1 research universities in the country. And we place our co-ops with over 4,000 companies across the United States. We are first and foremost an experiential global university system. And our mission here at the Roux Institute is to bring the power of that university to our community here to create an incredible opportunity engine for our region. And we do that because we are taking bets on what we think are the domains that are going to drive, we use the euphemism, the modern economy, but really it's technology, the use of technology, AI, data science, and advanced life sciences. We believe that's what's going to drive future economic growth. And so what we build here is a platform for industry, students, entrepreneurs, researchers to come together to figure out how to leverage these innovations and technologies to grow their careers, their businesses, their new enterprises. And so we are first and foremost about economic development. And so, you know, my colleague Dan, who just did the workshop, that was a perfect example. We want to work with businesses to think about how you develop your workforce. We want to think about how you might hire new talent pipelines. What are the kinds of innovative projects that you might want to work hand in hand with a university on to help advance and accelerate your growth? So we're always looking for partners. We're looking for companies that want to leverage this platform. Your employees, yourselves, if you'd like a graduate degree, I'm happy to offer you a very generous scholarship. And the last thing I'll just end on is that we are approaching our 5th birthday in January. We are really happy about the progress we've made. We now have over 800 students, graduate students in these domains of technology and life sciences. We have brought in about $27 million in research revenue. Our entrepreneurship programs have incubated now 94 startups. So when you come to the campus today, it's a really rich environment of entrepreneurs, business leaders, students, faculty. Fast forward to 2028, when we're going to be moving into our new campus, which is just a mile away from here. We're breaking ground this fall. Everything I just said will have doubled. So for all of you that are associated with companies that need new talent, I've got 125 students that want to go out on co-op in January, another 125, 150 that will go out on co-op in July, and we'll have about 250 students graduating in June. So if you would like some awesome talent, if you'd like to partner with us, the world is your oyster, and we'd love for you to come visit often. So doing programs like this and having business leaders come is really a benefit to us, to building our relationships with all of you. We hope it's the beginning, and I will hand it over back to Kathy, who's going to introduce the panel. All three members and the moderator are fantastic partners of ours, and they're extraordinary leaders in our community, and I know they have a lot to share with all of you. So thank you all for being here and for being part of this.
Thank you so much, Margaret. That was just fabulous, the overview. This is an incredible facility, but if you have a chance to look at the pictures over there of the new facility, you are just going to be totally blown away. I know, I was. Now, this kind of tinkers the Everest chance, because I am going to now introduce Lisa DeSisto, who is going to introduce the speakers. Lisa is the CEO and publisher of Maine Trust for Local News, and she's today's moderator. Lisa.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome this evening. As I introduce you, you can take your seat. It's Andy Muller, the CEO of Maine Health. Melissa Smith, the chair and CEO and president of WEX, who, Melissa, you're in this building, right? You're in, or next door. Okay, yep, okay. That way, and here is Steve Smith, the president and CEO of LL Bean. How many people are wearing something from LL Bean today? All right, I like that, I like that, I like that. It is so great to be here at the Roux Institute, and thank you, Margaret, thank you, Kathy. Steve hosted a lunch here a few years ago. He's so great at bringing the Maine business leaders together. And it was really the first time I understood what was happening at Roux. It was really quite a moment for us. And all of us have projects that have helped transform our businesses. And our two smartest employees are Roux graduates. So I can't endorse enough about the great work that they're doing and the economic impact that they're having here in Maine. So speaking of Maine, this is the all-star panel right here. And what I love about these three business leaders is how much they collaborate with each other. See if I can get this right. Melissa is on Andy's board. Steve is on Melissa's board. Oh, Andy, you got to get on one of their. That's right. And also one of the executives on Steve's team is also on. Yeah. Yeah, so there's so much collaboration and support because we all know together as our businesses thrive, so does Maine. So excited to host you here, and let's get rolling. So we're going to start with taking a look back at technology and innovation and the influence that it's had on your business, some of the challenges, the opportunities. Who wants to go first, Melissa?
I would love to. So thank you. So if I think back, the big three trends for us historically in the last few years have been the introduction of AI. And I'd say, we've been using AI before ChatGPT went live in November 2022. So our risk models have been built using AI long before this fad had started. But we've only built upon that. The second one for us has been moving into the cloud. So as we have made this transition into the cloud, which we completed everything we wanted to move by the end of last year, what that has enabled is a lot more flexibility. So the data sharing that it can happen across the company is much richer than it has been historically. And the reliability of the systems, the ability to move code in quicker. So think about speed of innovation. All of those things have been impacted by that. And it is a great foundation for this transition to generative AI. And then for us, the third big trend has been this shift to embedded payments, which probably when you get into your own worlds, you see a lot more of. And so that's that idea that an API can connect with open banking. And so if you think about the use of an Uber app or of a lot of your online tools that you use that are mobile based now is connecting through an API call that's going into an open banking system. And for us, where we have 800,000 customers that are global, that now allows us to create different workflows for our customers that are typically businesses, but ultimately that help consumers' lives be better. And so when I think about our history over the last several years, those are three things that have been really important for us, setting the foundation where we are right now.
Cool. Thanks. A couple things. So I'll go a little further back and then more recent history. So L.L. Bean, you probably know us originally as a catalog business and a retail business, but we're really an e-commerce business. And of our 1.7 billion in sales, 1.1 billion goes through our e-commerce site and everything processed through here. And I started in 2016, but from 2013 to 2017, we did a massive tech upgrade where we retired 400 legacy systems that were hand-coded, hard-coded, completely customized for the company, with 4 in the cloud off-the-shelf systems. That was SAP, Manhattan, Blue Yonder, which used to be JDA, and Manhattan Warehouse Management Systems. And so that was a massive tech transformation. Began before I started. It's really interesting. I can still remember, forever imprinted in my mind. March 27, 2017 was the go live date of all 4 of those systems. And on March 23rd, 2017, we suspended taking orders from customers and held them all in a queue while everything got shut down and all the new systems came up. And I remember when I started my job, I was told you can't do anything to slow down or touch that timeline because all the way through that date. So massive technological, that was all back office system, and so non-customer facing. I came in as a chief marketing officer prior to being CEO, and so very customer facing oriented. And so it was great to have all of those systems done, and in the background, we've now been orienting towards customer-facing technologies, and we're in that process now. And if I look at our most recent past, what we just did this summer, and we'll talk a little bit about what boards can do to help management with planning, but we have a vigorous strategic planning process. And one of the most important things we just finished this summer, it was a 2-year project, was we re-platformed that e-commerce site. And so we moved off of a 25-year-old e-commerce platform, which had been upgraded over 25 years, but was HCL Commerce. And we moved to Commerce Tools, which is a completely headless system. We're able to, completely agile, we're able to plug and play every little module within our site. And amazingly, and I'll knock on wood still, we did that with zero drama. And so we were able to make that shift and I remember this right before peak last year, we moved all of our guest checkout was already running through the new system. And then once we got through peak in the spring of this year, now all checkout is running through that new system. And so that's been our latest upgrade, has been our e-commerce site.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to take Steve's approach, talk a little bit farther back and a little bit more recently. You know, healthcare is one of those industries, you know, maybe the only industry in which, as we've implemented more and more technology, the costs have not gone down. They've continued to go up significantly. And I'll give you really I think the two biggest things that have impacted us from a technology standpoint, certainly going back a dozen years or so, is the implementation of the electronic health record. And in some ways, it was the promise to help create greater efficiency and reduce costs, and it certainly hasn't happened. And I think for the patients, it's probably been in some ways a better experience. I think about practicing medicine before we had the electronic health record on paper and after, and I can't imagine going back just in terms of the ability to really understand what's happened with the patient, having a complete story, and being able to communicate with the patient electronically. And all of those things are important. And at the same time, it's added a ton of cost. It's overwhelmed us with data. We're just absolutely dying of indigestion of all the data. And it's really frustrated our physicians, our nurses, who now feel like they spend more of their day typing than really engaging with patients. It's a real problem. And so that's probably been the one that has really transformed, had the biggest impact. And all of that was accelerated during the pandemic. Now, I think what we learned throughout this process, which is something I think we all need to think about moving forward, is there really was the promise that the electronic health record was going to make all of it faster and more efficient and easier. And what we learned pretty quickly is that if you didn't have the people and the process stuff right to begin with, the electronic health record just made a bigger mess faster. And that's sort of what we've been living with ever since. And you can see why that's really impacted both access to care, as many of you are feeling the challenges around getting care when you need it, as well as the cost to deliver care. Now, having said that, if you look at the actual increase in cost of healthcare delivery, hospitals and physicians, 50% of the healthcare spend over the last 4 or 5 years, despite about a cumulative 30-35% growth in labor inflation for healthcare over that period of time, the actual cost increase over the last few years has been roughly 1% to 2%. It doesn't feel like that, though, because of what I would describe as the second really big technological innovation that has occurred over the last few years that in some ways has really been fueled by AI. That's new drugs. And so for years and years and years, pharmaceutical spend has been fairly constant at about 7% of total healthcare spend. It's now about 12%, and that growth has occurred really in the last 6 years. And so now drug costs are rising at 18% per year, which is when your businesses see those premium increases, that's truly what that's reflecting. And there's no end in sight on that. So it's affected our business in a number of ways. We now have the ability to treat conditions that have largely been untreatable and refractory to care for centuries. And now miraculously, we can actually cure those patients, including pervasive disease, obesity, at the same time at tremendous cost. And so we're feeling the whiplash back on us of now having to manage everyone else's costs around the drugs because there's no more money to be spent on care delivery. And then we feel it as an employer. When we look at the spend on our own employees, we spend as a healthcare system, we spend $250 million on the healthcare plan for our own employees. And so that's putting a crimp on our business too. And so that's really, really had a profound impact on us over the last couple of years.
Andy, you have the most complex business, and we are thankful that you're leading it here in Maine. So thank you. Thank you for that. And I just want to say I love my chart. I do. So, like,
I think if we decided to rip out the electronic health, I think there would be a revolt. I think there would be a storming of the Bastille for sure.
So we appreciate that. So now let's take a look into the future. So we took a look back, the most profound changes. What are you looking for in the future? What are the opportunities? What are the things that are freaking you out?
Yeah, I'll tell you the thing. Yeah, so there are lots of things that freak me out, but there's one thing that's really freaking me out, which is we're becoming a much older nation. And so the demographic shifts, I think, that are occurring, we don't talk about nearly enough. So about 2015, 45 million-ish Americans over the age of 65. In 2035, 96 million Americans over the age of 65. There are going to be 185 million working age adults and only 86 million children in this country. We're going to be inverted like no time in our history, and there's not going to be enough of a workforce. So there are only going to be, because of those shifts, 4 million net new entrants into the job market in the next 10 years in the United States. I'm not talking healthcare. I'm talking every industry. There's only going to be 4 million net new workers in the workforce. There are presently today 3 million healthcare job vacancies available in the United States of America. We have been in an era of healthcare abundance for decades. If we don't have technology available to help augment our workforces today, we're going to be in a huge period of healthcare scarcity for the foreseeable future. So of those 4 million net new entrants into the job market, 3 out of every 4 have to choose a healthcare career to fill the gap today if demand remains stable, and with an aging population, it's not. So we're not like excited about AI and emerging technology. We're praying for it. We are desperate for it. And it is not to reduce our labor costs by eliminating jobs. We need every single one of our 24,000 care team members armed with technology to enable them to do far more effectively, far faster than they're physically capable of doing today. And so we're counting on the promise of that to occur. So some of the ways we're already deploying it, the thing I hated the most about practicing medicine was, at the end of the day, I'd either have a stack of charts this tall that I'd have to dictate, or I'd have an inbox full of charts to close at the end of the day. And now we're deploying ambient translation technology where, you can put a smartphone in the room with the patient's permission. It records the entire conversation that's occurring between a physician, a patient, family members. It attributes the conversation to the right individual, and then in the background completely completes a note. So the physician doesn't have to do anything anymore other than review it if they choose to. And the accuracy of the notes is really remarkable. And not just in terms of actually capturing what's said, but in generating something that really truly reflects the intent of the physician around diagnosis, treatment, and plans. So we've been rolling this out. It's an emerging technology that's developing very quickly. So now we're doing a bake-off between a couple of the different companies to see which one is truly most effective, because they all have different pricing, to think about how we can continue to augment the workforce that way. We're going to be doing this more with nurses as well as a way to do this. And as much as you like MyChart, there was a great study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association about 15 months ago that says people like MyChart better when who they're corresponding with is AI. Because the AI, frankly, was far more empathetic than the physicians in returning the notes. And you can imagine why. Not just because all docs or whatever, but they're busy and they're trying to get through their day, right? The AI has infinite amount of time to create beautiful diction that is more compelling and engages patients better. And so for sure, you're going to be seeing in the future more and more messages, and frankly, even conversations. There's interesting companies like Hippocratic AI that now you can chat with, and they can tell you things on the fly that the very best big-hearted care team member could never tell you, such as, oh, you're going to be traveling in Finland this summer. Well, while you're in Finland with your chronic kidney disease, these are some foods that you should avoid, and these would be great Finnish foods for you to eat. Something that it can do instantly, but somebody making $20 an hour sitting on the phone could certainly never do, unless they happen to be from Finland. So we see great promise and hope, and frankly, we have to have it, or we're all going to be in a lot of trouble.
was motivating. No, I would say, and like I sit on a little bit of a different side of that because so WEX, when I think about the future of technology, generative AI is something we are intensely focused on, and I think rightfully so because if you look at our size companies, we were 2.5 billion in revenue last year. We processed 225 billion worth of volume that goes through our platform. So like massive scale it's going through. And we compete against startup companies who have an ability to start using AI as their kind of base. And we compete against some really large companies who have an ability to spend a tremendous amount of money in these new capabilities. And so what I find is that companies like ours that are that mid cap, that you have to be really thoughtful of how you're deploying your capital, but also making sure that you're using technology as an advantage and not being left behind. And so we're really focused around AI in 3 different categories. The first one was just immerse our employees in what's possible. And we did that because we wanted to make sure that people thought about this as what is possible as instead of it being fear-based, which I think when you think about something like AI, it just creates that sense of fear that I'm going to lose my job. Where in reality, most of what we've done so far has taken the toil out of people's lives so that it scrapes away a lot of the work that people don't really want to be doing anyway, so they can focus on a higher order of work. And the second thing that we've been really focused on is productivity. And I think about that as a defense. And so if we aren't focusing on places that we can create productivity competitively, that's going to be a problem for us over time. And with generative AI in particular, because they're using data, there is actually an exponential impact of someone being ahead of you because they're learning that much faster than you are. And so we've been really big believers in looking at ways and experimenting pretty heavily on the productivity side. And say similarly, we can actually record meetings and summarize notes associated with that. Our call center reps can get off a call and not actually have to be spending time doing wrap up. That gives us a whole other level of data that we can mine and a customer experience. And so it creates also a better customer experience. Our developers are using tools that help them initiate code and look for different ways to write code, and that's creating productivity across the organization. We have an agent in-house called Finn, so self-titled, that helps employees can go in and ask Finn questions, and it's used very readily across the company. And then we're using already home-based tools, ChatGPT, Claude. People are going into each of the systems they have, like our Google system has something called Gemini. And so there's a whole bunch of different tools that people are deploying. And I would say it's really broad-based across the company. But with the 3 biggest categories that we've been focused on has been our operations group, our technology group, and then our marketing group. So we're places that we think that you can actually see exponential productivity improvements. And then the third thing has been very much focused on the customer. So we think of AI as a way that you can actually create a tuber. You can create a better customer experience and you can do it more intuitively. And so actually one of our examples on the flip side of that is one of our offerings that we have is a benefit administration offering that allows employees to enroll in their benefit offerings. And then that links into a payment so they can make a payment from a tax deferred account like an HSA account or an FSA account. And what we know from talking to that customer set is the majority of employees don't actually want to talk to someone in HR about their benefits because they are uncomfortable with that conversation and they'd rather have an artificial intelligence tool that can work on the other side of that can answer the questions. Majority of the people are doing that work also outside of work hours. And so again, we can create a better experience from a customer perspective, which is more intuitive to what they want, and do it in a way that is probably at a lower cost than the way we're doing it before. And we have numerous examples of that. So when I think about AI, I think about it in terms of make sure that people are aware of what's possible and continue to continue that. And the RU is doing wonderful work on that front. Make sure that you're really focused on the defense, which is productivity, and then we're really keen on how we can actually roll out products that are differentiated based on AI capability.
Melissa, I think it's really smart how you started with educating your employees, because you're exactly right. Everyone's just afraid that they're going to lose their job instead of thinking about how they can be better at their job. So I think that's important.
We'll talk about this later, but I think that starts at the board level. In making sure that, if people are immersed in it and they start to use it, then it makes it more tangible. And then what you find is people then use it over and over and over again.
I think I'll bring it to a little more mundane level. So, and actually everything you talked about I'm now nervous about all of that in the future, which I wasn't earlier. Because I think you said, like, what are we concerned about or worried about in the future, whatever. So now I'm worried about Andy's world a lot more. But a lot more mundane, and I know we'll talk about AI in a little bit more, but for us, we are the most important future initiative we are working on right now is around our data. And you can't apply any of these AI tools unless you have fantastic accessible data, and we do not. So to give you an idea, we have 144,000 active SKUs. Those SKUs, we have a product database that has about 250 fields in it for all the different specifications for those products. That sits on a mainframe. We have a customer database of 40 million customer files, over 500 attributes per customer file. That sits on a mainframe. And so we have a massive undertaking right now called marketing modernization. And then in that we have tons of acronyms. So we have EDP and CDP. EDP is Enterprise Data Platform. CDP is Customer Data Platform. And we are taking all of that data and we are cleaning it. We are making it more uniform and we are moving it to the cloud and then bringing in new tools that will allow us to access that data outside of doing SQL queries and having our teams literally running overnight files for audience building and things like that, which happens now. So huge initiative for us. To give you an idea of some of the work, and actually we do a practicum with the RU every year. You had Dan spoke earlier. We work with RU master's students as their capstone for their master's degree, and we have our employees in as well. And they've been helpful in cleaning up our data and give you an idea of the things we run into. In our product database, the color blue is abbreviated in 11 different ways. It's B, it's BL, it's BLU, it's BLUE, it might be Azure, it could be anything. And the same with women's. Women's is W, women's is WM, WMN, it's a million different ways. And so those super mundane things all have to be cleaned up before we can put on top of it really advanced tools that can then go in and mine that data for different stuff. So those are huge initiatives underway. They're future focused. They will unlock all kinds of opportunities for us. Some of them to the point of the conference, some of them are top line driving and some of those will be efficiency driving as well. But it's a huge amount of future focused work that we're doing.
That's exactly what Dan was talking about in the pre-workshop. So yeah, about how mechanics spelled Toyota 73 different ways, and you've got to clean your data up. So yeah, you've got a blue problem for sure. You got a blue problem. That's just blue. Yeah, that's just right. Yeah, forget that. So let's connect the conversation then to your board and corporate directors. Obviously, all of these issues that you're thinking about are so critical to the future of your companies. How does the board participate in this conversation? What questions do they ask? How do they stay informed? Who wants to take it?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think Melissa said this well earlier. A lot of it really starts with education. And in fact, we really actually partnered with the RU Institute to help begin that education process with our board. And it's one of those things that I think, even though we're not a technology business per se, is got to be one of our sort of core competencies that we talk about regularly, just to continue to make sure that cadence is there and that continuous learning is occurring. Because I think as we think about, your responsibility as boards with the technology coming, there is for sure a need to be conservative around how we apply it in a patient-facing way. That's not resolved yet. We're not sure if the FDA is going to oversee it, probably, but we're not sure what that looks like. But until that time, there's still going to be plenty of other ways that we can use AI and technology. So I think from my perspective, I need my board like pushing us hard on the application of artificial intelligence and smart systems, because again, we're going to struggle to overcome that labor gap if we don't. And so pushing them, educating them. In fact, I took a few board members recently to a conference where that was part of what was discussed, to just make sure they understand that we're going to have to go with this fast, and we need their encouragement and support to continue to push it. And I think where it's going to get a little bit complicated for our boards, particularly for us, is as we mentioned earlier, the data is a challenge for us in healthcare because we generate so much of it. Large language models are one of the solutions because they can help us not only manage the data, but really identify which of all of these data points are really the ones that are important. But that's going to increasingly put value on our data, and many of you already probably think about the value of your data and may realize appropriately the value of your customers' data. In our case, it's our patients' data. But that's going to be probably the next thing that's going to go along with that, is thinking about how do we manage that? How do we ultimately train some of these tools? What's the value of that data? And whose data is it? And how do we think about using it, even if it's de-identified? And so those are going to be some of the things I think we'll continue to wrestle with our board.
So more broadly, if we talk about technology from a board perspective, I think it's really important that the board links the technology to the business outcome, because it's pretty easy to be enamored with technology. And when we're doing it, there's a piece that you want to be experimental, but generally you want it to be driving some purpose. And even as Steve was talking about the data elements, a lot of what we've done is make projects very specific to outcomes. And so as you're cleansing the data, you're doing it in the purpose of an outcome. And over time, all of those outcomes accumulate into the foundation you need, even more broad base. The second thing, I'm a big believer in technology committees. Now we have one at WEX. I'm on the board of Equifax. We have one there as well. Because a lot of what the board is able to do is set time and management attention. And just in having a technology committee and separating that work creates a forcing function around making sure that you're actually really thinking about technology and with a strategic lens, obviously from a security lens as well. But I think that anything that you can do that helps create that level of discipline to make sure the technology is driving an outcome, and that the technology has its own spotlight, so you're thinking about what's possible, are really important from a board perspective.
How common do you think it is for boards to have a technology committee?
It depends on what type of company they are. We did research. So when we at WEX set up a technology committee, it's been probably 10 years since we put one in place. And it was really when we started a digital transformation, we were starting our migration into the cloud, that I felt like having that level of oversight was important. And we did a search at that point in time, and we found it wasn't the majority of companies that had them, but it wasn't abnormal either. And I think, particularly we have technology-based companies that it was much more prevalent. And at that point in time, it was either at a technology committee or risk committee. And, our audit committee scoops up most of the risk aspects. And so with the exception of security. So I have really liked it. And I think that the third thing that we are working through still is the governance related to AI, because that is a little bit like the Wild West, frankly, out there. Is, if you're looking at governance, you want to make sure that you're giving people enough leeway to be in the game, and knowing that the government structure is going to morph over time. But a piece of that connects through all the different committees. And so we've set up our governance structure. We've done it with this idea that the technology committee is kind of the primary point, but we're going to pull that thread across the organization and know that that there's going to have to be a lot of communication across.
For us, so we don't have a tech committee. And for us, technology at the board level comes up into audit, really specifically around cybersecurity. And then we have an enterprise risk management model and a risk register that we use. And when we have a major, an ERM replacement, if we're replacing our website, something like that, it's going to come up into the audit committee. And that feels much more like a governance checklist process versus a challenging on our technology. What our board does around technology, which is good and useful, is they're always challenging us in our strategic planning, what is the role of technology in the plans that we are bringing forward? And so it's always put in the case of strategic planning. We typically are asked the question, one of our particular board members is tech astute and a great business leader, and he's always asking us, what business problem are you trying to solve? What use case are you trying to solve? And if we answer with a lot of things, he will then force us to prioritize those use cases. And it's really helpful for us. We usually come out of those conversations. It's usually around long-range planning. It's about our budgeting. It's looking at our capital plan. And when we see the list of those investments, he's immediately challenging the use cases. And that is a really helpful role of a board member. Also, Andy threw a great nugget to all of us, I think, on another great question that we get from our boards as well around technology is, do you have the people and the processes in place to actually implement that technology and then use that technology? And that is a really helpful question to get from the board. And typically you're caught flat-footed and you're talking about you're enamored by a particular piece of technology. Your teams are working on people process. We have an OCM, organizational change management team, but being challenged on that and making sure that you've got it so it's going to land in the right place. I think the board can push management to do that.
So, Melissa, you touched on the committee, the technology committee. You have an expert, it sounds like, that challenges you and pushes you from the board perspective. You want to drill into that a little bit more? Do you think it's really up to everyone on the board to have a certain level of technology, literacy? And Andy, you took some board members to a conference to learn more about that. How can people get up to speed? What do you think the best way to make sure the board is driving you on this is?
You know, we have done, I think, and I'm sitting next to one of my board members, so I may get the feedback here whether or not we are or not. We just have decided that we have to devote a portion of every board meeting to education. I've got another board member sitting in the front row here too, so I'm sort of surrounded. But that we just need to dedicate a certain portion of our board time to education regularly. And I don't know if we're the most complex business, but we're pretty complex. And it's hard for people who aren't in healthcare to sit on our board to have to try to digest what is a convoluted business model, all the complexities of care delivery, the responsibilities around very complex quality and safety. And then on top of that, have to think about cybersecurity and AI and how it impacts all of those things that we're trying to learn about. So I think being very strategic about that, being very intentional about that, is going to be very important. I think we've done a better job more recently really around cybersecurity. We're certainly huge targets and really starting to help educate our board around what that's going to look like, what that's going to mean, and how we protect the organization. And frankly, just given the realities of the environment, how we'll respond when we get attacked one day and what that will mean for our patients and our communities. And so I think now the next step in that evolution is continue to introduce more and more discussions about AI, how we're thinking about it, how we use it today, how we're going to think about it in the future, and how it is going to impact the workforce.
Wait, can you hold the mic? Can you just?
Yes.
Because this is the NACD group. Can you
Yes.
how many board members you have?
We have, at the present, 24. And like a lot of healthcare systems, a number of hospitals came together with representative board seats. And so we've now sort of passed the probationary period in which that has to remain that way. So I think we'll start to work on the size over time in a thoughtful manner. I don't think we'll be down to 8 though, either. It'll be a big board, and it represents some diverse communities, which is important.
So our board, we have 3 technology experts, and they're amazing. We just added Amy Cardwell, who is, her background is in security. It's a wonderful expert to have on, and she also has a background in both benefits and payments. We have a serial tech entrepreneur who also teaches at Harvard Business School, and one of the things he teaches is AI. And we have the former head of technology for Citibank, who is on our board. And so I feel like we have a great foundation. That being said, the education's happening across the board, and the board is all in and fully engaged in those conversations. We've had external speakers in. We've had Shakar has done. He's done a couple of sessions with the board as well, where they've actually hands-on started using some of the technology. And so I feel like we're in this privileged position of having a highly engaged board and having experts that can really elevate that conversation. And like, in fact, I would say a couple of years ago, I had lunch with Shakar, and this was before ChatGPT came out, but we were having a conversation the importance of AI, and it was kind of like the light bulb, went off, and we just said, okay, this is going to be such a big focus of ours that we're going to have this as a standing agenda item in every meeting going forward, and we have for 2 years now, either in our tech committee or at the full board level, that and security. And we think of them as like both equally important in many ways.
I would add, I have two different perspectives on this. So I don't have a tech expert on my board. Matt is a fantastic retailer, but he's a good technology, I don't know, adjacent kind of guy. And I wish that we did have more of a tech expert on our board. I am on the WEX board with Melissa, and Don, Shakar, and Amy are amazing. And I think having that expertise on the board raises the game and the expectations for all of us as board members. And I do think that every board member, the responsibility is on them to become as tech literate as they possibly can. I also think it's a great opportunity for your management team to be teachers of the board, and you can create a really interesting, trusting relationship where you will have really impressive technologists inside your organizations, and maybe having them teaching the board could be a really powerful thing to be considering. WEX has done just an absolutely incredible job of integrating our education with Shakar and Don teaching, sometimes management teaching, but all of us learning at the same pace. We also, I don't know how strict you are with your committees, but Melissa is pretty strong about recommending that all board members attend the tech committee meeting, even if we're not on the tech committee, so that we're all hearing, because WEX is such a technology-oriented business, it really behooves everybody to be up to speed on that. For LL Bean, and we have an 11-person board, 6 family members, 4 independents, and myself, I wish there was more tech fluency or literacy on the board to help our CIO in our prioritization and looking out. We have to do all of that environmental scanning ourselves, which is fine, but we then are building our networks, and our CIO has a fantastic external network to go out and learn what's happening in other places and to bring that in. But it would be great to have somebody who is pushing us at the board level. The interesting thing, what I do is I take what I learn at WEX and I bring it to LL Bean. And so typically when I come back from a WEX board meeting, I have taken copious notes on technology, and I sit down with JJ, our CIO, and I'm challenging him on the things that I've learned. And I think any of you can do that with the CEOs that you're coaching, the businesses that you're on. There are things that are being learned in one place that are totally transferable to another, and encouraging that's really powerful.
I think what you just said is great for those on boards. I find great value being on other boards for that same reason. Like you learn a couple of things. You learn the perspective of what it's like to be on the other seat, which is actually helpful. But it also, you take away how people do things differently, and what you want to bring back into your org. And I think it's so worth the time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Melissa. So shall we open it up to questions? Because it's been really incredible conversation and so many opportunities, and want to give our attendees an opportunity to tap into the expertise that's here. And also, if there are any questions from folks online, we would be happy to take them as well. I guess you can have mine. I will, I can't say I'll Phil Donahue this because that makes me sound really old. So I'll YouTuber it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentations, all excellent. So I'm Bob Baylor, former COO of the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. So software is in my DNA. But more importantly, it's cybersecurity. We're live in a software-defined world. There's just no way to get around it. And one of the things, especially in healthcare, I've got scar tissue from MHS Genesis trying to implement that in the Department of Defense and VA, and it's got all kinds of problems. The biggest problem is cybersecurity. So what I'm asking each of you is, I would think that the most important thing you have, and I'm not going to speak for you, is your customer confidence, that they're not going to lose their information, credit cards, and so on. But from healthcare, it's really important. So how are you protecting the information of the patients or your clients, and how do you know it's working?
Yeah, great question. It is certainly, you're right, that trust with our patients is everything. And you can lose it quickly. And I think when I first took the job here at Maine Health, I talked to a peer who had just gone through a cybersecurity attack. And, he shared a thought process that was identical to mine, envisioning what it was going to be like. Hey, this happened on a Thursday. There goes the weekend. And what he didn't understand was this was going to be a several-month disruption. And during that period of time, they were unable to provide much of the care that their community needed and was counting on. And was devastating. Forget the finances, just thinking about what we do, just the impact to actually delivering care to patients was enormous. And we've seen incidents of that. Another peer of mine in Pennsylvania was attacked. And in that case, they actually got photographs of women's body parts that were appropriately imaged for preparing for cancer surgery or cancer treatments, and put those in an identified manner on the internet, which is just it's just mind-blowing how devious these individuals are. So the best thing that we have decided to do, and in fact, after listening to some of the Change Healthcare issues that happened back in the fall, listening to a webinar with United Healthcare team that had gone through this, we just decided we're still not prepared enough, despite engaging with the cybersecurity firm, having them on retainer, probing ourselves every day. We're cataloging all the probes we get, and we get attacked about 80 times a day. And so we monitor it. We see how, we're constantly following this. We still decided that's not enough. So now we've decided that the way we're going to try to manage this is just psychologically expecting it is going to occur, but truly trying to be prepared for it. So when it happens, it doesn't feel like a panicked situation. We've got our act together. We know what to do. We've been through this drill a million times. This should be fairly familiar to us. And it's changed the way we think about things. So we go through exercises. And in fact, since I'm the CEO, I know we got one of these coming up that's unplanned, where we will go through what it feels like to be attacked. And I think in going through this, we've identified some gaps. We've identified some board gaps. And one of the best things I did at the suggestion of our chief counsel was I sat down with our insurance broker, our cybersecurity insurance broker, who is able to, who watches these things unfold regularly, to ask the question, what is it going to feel like on the day I get the phone call and this occurs? And one of the things we learned was that it's going to happen much faster than you think, and you're going to have to make a decision. Your insurance company is not, about whether you're paying a ransom or not. And there are consequences to that decision. The second you decide you're going to pay it, then suddenly you become an even greater target, because more bad actors think you're going to pay it. And so you're suddenly going to see an exponential increase in the number of attempts that you're going to get the second that you do that. But you're going to have to make that decision, and you're going to need authority to do that. So one of the things it forced us to do was rethink that authority. And so we designated a handful of board members based on their roles on the board to create a small, nimble group that could be raised quickly instead of having to go to the whole board to ask for the spending limit, spending authority on a cybersecurity attack. So it's helped us think differently about that, for sure. Now, is that enough? No, that's still not going to be enough. One of the best things one of our board members did in our board meeting, though, is knowing that we need to do everything we can, is he asked our cybersecurity officer, what resources are you being denied And what do you wish you could have that you're not able to get today? And thankfully, his answer was, I've gotten everything I've asked for. Everything I think we need, we have. But I thought that was a wonderful question as a director to ask, because it just sort of gives you a sense of where that is prioritized in the organization.
So not in the healthcare world, but the threats are a lot bigger, obviously. And what we're seeing is, phishing's always been a vulnerability point for organizations, so it's something we have to be vigilant on, and we continue to make sure we're monitoring. But the thing that people are worried about in my world more is the reliance on third-party software. So you think your stack, you're going to have people that are in your stack, and if they get attacked, then and your single source. So CrowdStrike was which was not a cybersecurity event, but you think about, had it been, it's in everybody's stack. It was much more prevalent than I think people have really expected it to be. And so part of what we spend a lot more time now is analyzing third parties, and really understanding where their vulnerabilities are, and is it okay to have them in our stack, and what happens if something happens to them, because you could still be down in a core part of your system, but without being breached yourself. And so we put a lot more mind share around that than I would say that we ever have. The other thing we're seeing is a lot more use of artificial intelligence to create these deep fakes. And that actually is kind of scary, because it's a new version of phishing in a way, where people can get credentials from a legitimate user by faking who they are. And so I expect that the use of artificial intelligence is just going to force us to be thinking about security in a whole different way. But it is something that is top of mind, and it is the one place in the company where we don't say, can you do it with less? We actually, what do you need? And we make sure that that is one of the first things we cover.
I'd agree with all that, and I'd say from a retailer's perspective, I have two massive fears. One is a mass shooting, and we just experienced the Lewiston shooting in a week. That will be the 1-year anniversary of that, and a data breach. And those are definitely the two things that are sort of the most things that keep me up at night, and worried about for our employees' basis. On cybersecurity, and for you as board members, I think for me specifically as CEO, our chief, head of cybersecurity is super close. I know him well. Anything he needs, it's very similar. Like, it's never a cost-cutting exercise. It is, what do you need? I know that team, spend time with that team. I would encourage your CEO to not just delegate that to the CIO, but to make that person and their organization a bit on a pedestal, so you recognize the importance. Because the number one breach is an employee clicking on a phishing email and not taking security seriously. And so everything that your security team is trying to do typically is trying to change behavior of employees. And if it's important to the CEO, then it's important to the employees. And so I think you as board members can make sure that it's really high on the CEO's agenda. Of course, you want to have all the investments. We follow a defense and defense and layers, defense and depth chart. We follow that really carefully, and every single audit committee, a different thing is yellow, and that's where we're investing, or that's what we're looking at. But it's always in our audit committee for that.
Do you run drills with your employees to see what they'll fall for?
I was going to say a couple things actually. When you were, so we did a full cybersecurity tabletop exercise with an outside firm, but we also got to a conclusion about what we will or won't do with the ransomware, and we know that answer. And it's not on writing anywhere, because our emails will be hacked, and someone will just look up, like, are they willing to pay or not, and what's their limit. But I know as CEO and as a board exactly what we will do and how we will do it, and what we will or won't do. I don't have to ask anybody at the board level, depending on what happens. And so we did that exercise, enabled us to answer all the questions that we think we're going to have to answer in advance. And then yes, we do all kinds of phishing with our team, and it's awful. It's like 12% people still click on stuff. It's amazing.
One of the things we did, I'm on the board of Equifax. I was there post-breach, and so security for them is obviously incredibly important from a brand perspective. And it is in everybody's goals. So, so watching their level of making sure that phishing is not click-through is really interesting, and making sure that, like I said, like every employee is part of their goals. And that creates that kind of that top-down behavior, which has been really interesting to watch. They did a tabletop exercise at the board level, which was really great. So, so at the board level, they pretended that there was a breach and kind of go. What will you do? Who is in charge? How are you going to answer those questions? And management had already done their own tabletop exercise, and so they were trying to see how connected that was that to what the board thought, and I thought it was really valuable.
Andy?
I was going to
Yeah.
say the other thing that we do, which is hard, is we limit the number of interfaces to our systems. And sometimes that's really challenging because you have a really good clinical case on why you want to connect with another physician practice, or you want to connect with another health system, or you want to do those things. And more often than not, the answer is no, because we look at every one of those interfaces as a huge vulnerability for cybersecurity attack, particularly to Melissa's point about other systems, third-party vendors, all of those things.
What other question? Oh.
So you talked a little bit about some of the great benefits of AI and generative AI, but I'm interested to ask you a little bit about the risk of AI. And you know, Steve, you talked about your enterprise risk committee and risk register, but how would you advise boards to manage risk of AI?
So the way that we've talked about it, we talk about the big strategic decisions with the board. And so as an example, the decision of are you going to use OpenAI, so open source or not? Are you going to allow your employees to have access and to use that at work or not? Are you going to, like in our case, we've decided to, we're using an enterprise model, so that means that we're learning on the data, but it doesn't get exposed externally. And so I think there's some really foundational strategic decisions that it's important that the board is involved in. And then from a governance perspective, that there is a framework, and that framework is reviewed and discussed, and it's a bit of a living document, because again, it is changing pretty rapidly, but I think there's some basics around how you're going to use AI, and making sure that there's an understanding of that.
I mean, we're exactly the same. We've locked down any outside AI, no ChatGPT, nothing can come in through the system. And then we went to an enterprise model. We're a Microsoft house, so we have Copilot, and we have Copilot enabled for all employees, and encouraging people to use it, experiment, play with it. We're way back on the curve. Like what I'm learning at WEX around AI is so far beyond. I mean, we're using it for code development, for some creative work, copywriting, starting to bring it into our CX, our customer experience environment, but sort of moving slowly into it. I mentioned earlier, like, I can't wait. I would like to put our entire product database into a large language model and be able to just mine it for all kinds of interesting insights. But until we get through that data cleansing stuff, you know, we're really just sort of playing around on the surfaces on it. But we're totally locked down, as it's everything that anybody in the company is doing. They're doing it through Copilot.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think for us in the present time, it's things like Copilot, which we're using and implementing. It's things like the digital dictation, which we have very strict agreements with those vendors around what happens with that data, even though in theory, they only have access beyond the transcription to the de-identified information. But while the Federal Trade Commission is all over us about consolidation as providers in healthcare, even though we're really a mom and pop industry, all of our vendors are monopolies. And so it makes it pretty easy for us, because so much of, I think, what will happen on the patient-facing side will largely be the adoption of AI by companies like Epic, which will, you know, and I think the more we're trying to partner with other health systems with Epic to understand what is the pace of that, what are the risks of that, and understanding that, And certainly we believe the Federal Drug or the Food and Drug Administration, the federal government are going to want to have some guidelines around using it for diagnosis and treatment. In the meantime, there are lots of applications that even our board probably doesn't always think about that are relatively safe for us to continue to implement and use. So for example, we're locked in an arms race with our AI against the payers' AI to figure out how they can deny the claims and we can actually get paid for them and that kind of stuff. So, that kind of stuff will continue unabated, but I do think that there are going to be early adopters in healthcare. And so I think our board will certainly be engaged in some of these discussions. They don't know it yet, but we're going to have a discussion here in a couple months just about data that will ultimately support AI. And so that's going to be, I think, that'll be an anxiety-provoking time for all of us on the delivery side.
Andy, I would think that the dictation in an appointment with your care provider would actually be a better experience for the patient because they don't have their head down on the keyboard taking notes the whole time.
We're seeing that. So we're following that and trending where that goes. And it's been interesting. So about a quarter of our physicians who've used it have said, I'm just going to keep typing. I'm not sure what's wrong with them, but that's what they keep doing. About 50% are like, hey, this is way better. And 25% are like, my life has changed, just immeasurably. And it's been, for some of them, I think it's saved them and enabled them to continue to practice medicine where they were ready to just call it a day and stop.
You didn't mention telehealth. How transformative is that, especially in a rural state like Maine?
It's mixed, and so and honestly, we love telehealth. We have to be different. We are in a rural state. We're in a state with limited resources, and our vision as an organization is working together so our communities are the healthiest in America. But we've got this sort of perverted business model where we admit patients to the hospital, do things to them, and charge them for, submit charges for reimbursement, which at times is important, but is not going to enable us to achieve that vision of working together so our communities are the healthiest in America. So in some ways, we truly want to disrupt ourselves and build a business model in which the value of an unoccupied hospital bed economically is greater than the value of an occupied hospital bed. And so telehealth can clearly help us work and achieve that. So we certainly saw an uptake with the pandemic, but it did sort of peak and it came down a little bit and has somewhat plateaued. But where we've been successful certainly is behavioral health. Patients don't necessarily, particularly if they're anxious to begin with or depressed, want to travel to an unknown environment with someone they're not really, familiar with, or in an environment where they're going to disclose what their conditions are. And so they like being at home and being able to use FaceTime to converse with someone on a behavioral health matter. One area where we've really had success was the primary care shortage, and the challenges around access in primary care are just overwhelming at the moment. So we wanted to understand how could we free up more capacity in our primary care clinics by offloading some of the important but low acuity types of care that could be easily handled through telehealth. And so things like pink eye or sinus infection or sore throat or urinary tract infection, those kind of things. So we built internally a nice little telehealth platform using Epic to create a same day sort of urgent care service for our established primary care patients to enable them to use that instead of having to go in to see one of our physicians or APPs. And what's been amazing about that is the patients love it, which is great, which was not a shock to me once we sort of internally marketed it as, hey, this is still your care team. You're still going to get the same type of experience, and you can trust the outcome. But what has really been remarkable for me is that the physicians whose patients use it, they love it too, because it really has enabled them to see the patients that need to be seen urgently, and the feedback they're getting from the patients about the telehealth experience has been really great. So we've seen just exponential adoption of that, and we're continuing to roll this out more and more, and it's been kind of fun to watch that grow organically.
How are we doing on time? Oh, pretty good. Any more questions? What do we have? Oh, Quincy.
I do.
Oh, sorry. Oh, at home. Sorry. Thank you. I'm Quincy Hensel. I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. And this might be more of a comment, but I'm just thinking in terms of my own board, which Lisa is on, because of course this is how Portland works. And I have reps from like most of your organizations on my board. But something, you were all talking about phishing being a risk with employees. What I've encountered in the last week, and I'm not sure if Lisa was a recipient of this, is people phishing with my board members. So my whole board this week received an email. We received lots of emails for different reasons, but we can talk about policy and people now coming at boards to change people's policy positions. But for tech, my board received a phishing email this week. 2 of them that looked super legit. One came from my board chair and one came from somebody internally at the chamber, and it was all about, transferring money. And my board is like fairly sophisticated, and I had several board members forward it to me being, what is this? I didn't know I owed this, or I didn't know there was like a refund coming my way. So anyway, I just put that out there. I'm not sure if anybody's experienced that, but that literally happened like yesterday and today, and will be a board agenda item for our next board meeting. Just a reminder to our board that you too can be the target of phishing emails.
So you didn't need $500 because I sent it. Can you Venmo it? Can you Venmo it back to me? Can you Venmo it back to me? Deb, are there any questions? No? Oh, well, that's their loss because this is a great conversation. Oh, here we go.
I'm interested to hear your perspectives on this. So the International Standards Organization just published something called ISO 42001. So as you can see, they've done lots of documents. This one I think is really useful from a generative AI perspective because it says, here is what to think about from a generative AI perspective, and then kind of gives you a framework to say, what does good governance look like? And then are you dotting your I's and crossing your T's on that front? And I imagine that this will change over time, right? But if I look at your 3 organizations, how useful do you see a framework being that you can then modify to fit the needs of your organization at kind of bridging the gap between yourselves as management of an organization, as board members of that organization, and then your team in that organization to say, this is where we're going, this is what good looks like, this is what responsible usage of this technology looks like for us. And then how are you using that today in other things outside of generative AI? How has that been successful? Or do you just not like it? And then how do you think that's going to be useful in the future for things like generative AI or machine learning or just AI in general as you move forward and make selections? And then also as you establish partnerships with third parties that are maybe, you can see an attestation for those types of things as you inspect what you expect for those partners.
So as a rule, we actually like, so if you can create a global framework, particularly global because we're competing globally, it's a positive. And what we find, like I'll give an example which isn't data privacy. Very complicated is, because our products are used around the world and we're using different requirements and different geographies, which makes that not as scalable from a customer perspective and creates just a tremendous amount of complexity for nuanced differences that aren't really that big a deal in many cases. So where there is a level of consistency, that's actually beneficial. Again, like as we've looked at this, we actually have spent time, our chief legal officer, this is one of her goals, is to make sure that we're continuing to update our global framework around artificial intelligence, knowing that it is a work in progress. So we've spent a lot of time externally talking to other companies about what they're doing. And I would say from those conversations as well, like having some type of a framework would be viewed positively because we're all just trying to figure this out. Some things are clear, like this idea of how much of the data and how much of that you want to allow other people to learn from your data and whether or not you're going to put that out into other models. And then there are other pieces of this that are harder. Pretty much everything we're doing right now is still a human in the middle. And so some of the concerns that will morph will come as that migrates. in to the extent that that human gets removed, and where you get a lot more risk of prejudice and bias that's happening in those models. And so I feel like this is going to be it's going to be a lot of change that's going to happen over time, and we're all going to have to learn this together. But I personally would welcome having a framework.
What she said.
Melissa, I also admire, I've heard you say this a couple of times, things that are important, you put in people's goals. And there's no better way to make sure that they get addressed than that. Accountability is great.
That starts here, right? Like they're in my goals. Yeah, no, that's actually with one of the great things the board did when we were talking a lot about AI, and I felt like we were making great incremental improvements, and the board came back and said, what if we stretched you and had you think bigger? And they put some goals out there for us that are multi-year goals around productivity improvements, around education with employees, and around percentage of products that will be deployed that have AI in them. And it really caused us to think differently. You know, you had to swallow hard and say, okay, like if we're really going to do this, then what does that mean? And I feel like it was another forcing function for us to think at an even bigger level. I'm like a big believer in working backwards, and it gave us something to work backwards from. And so, so that commitment, I would say, starts from the board all the way through.
You know, a couple other things that I think we're going to have to think about with this. You know, speaking of goals, we've got a goal around environmental sustainability and reducing our energy usage over the next little bit. And I think we're just going to create capacity to refill it with all the electricity demands, to use all the systems that are going to require all the, the AI processing, which is something that I think as boards, we're going to have to continue to think about. How do we impact that? How can we work with the vendors of the technology to continue to think about their energy demands? How do we help them think about capital allocation to new technologies that will reduce some of that demand over time, and what role we all have to play in that? And then I think, as we've mentioned, I think, as Melissa was talking about her 40% operating margin, I was talking about my 1% operating margin, and how we make those types of investments. For some of us, particularly for those of you who are on boards of technology companies, as artificial intelligence, these technologies are being rolled out, for some of us, we are going to be dying of thirst in terms of the need for the technology to solve some of our labor challenges that are otherwise unsolvable, and some of those other things. So how that technology is priced, how we think about the broader impact to our society around some of those decisions and what the ramifications of that may be, are going to be more critical than ever. And I think it's going to be our boards that are going to have to really think and really manage some of those discussions. I think if all of us could turn the clocks of time back around social media and the internet and other things, we probably would have made some different decisions. And I don't want us to have to do that yet again with artificial intelligence. And so I think we're looking at all of you and your peers to really help us think about some of those broader implications, because we can really do some wonderful things with this technology, or it could do a lot of harm.
This has been a great conversation, and guess what it's time for? The 2 to 3 takeaways. Are you ready? Who wants to start?
I think so. I may have done mine just then. I think I
feel
just
you.
did.
I feel,
Yeah,
you
I
know
think I may
what,
have
Andy?
done.
I feel
Yeah.
like you did. I mean, but that was
yeah.
one.
But I
No.
do think it won't be in the too distant future where you will be engaging increasingly with AI around your healthcare. And I really actually think that's a good thing. I think there are a lot of things that we're going to be able to do better with AI. I think in some cases it will give you a better experience. And so keep that in mind moving forward. I'm actually pretty optimistic about all of this. I'm a little pessimistic about some of the real challenges we face at the moment, but I actually think that we've got real potential to solve a lot of these problems through technology.
So my 3 for the board would be: number 1, recognize the fact you're talking to people who have short-term commitments they have to make too. So they're balancing that short-term and long-term. And one of the ways that you can influence that is time on an agenda. You control that. And if you control the time on the agenda, that actually typically moves management into spending more of their time on the subject. So to make sure you carve out the time for that. The second thing I'd say for yourselves as well is immerse yourself in the technology, because you also want to start from the land of possibility, and it's hard to do that in a hypothetical. It's much better if you've actually deployed some of the tools, and it's not that hard to tinker. And the third thing I'd say is that allow your management team to experiment. It's one of the great things that the board has allowed us to do is this idea that not everything you do has to be successful, but you actually have to move and show progress and forward motion, because if you get in the game and you start using the tools, you learn a lot, and that creates momentum in itself. And so give some grace to the idea that this is going to be a learning journey and it's not all going to be perfect.
And my three would be educate yourself, be inquisitive, and be supportive. And if I unpack that a little bit on the educate yourself, I think the responsibility is on each board member to think about educating yourself both generally on what are the trends that are out there that are in the vernacular that people are talking about and learning about, and then specifically, what are some of the technologies that impact your business. And take that responsibility upon yourself. And actually, I think it can differentiate you as a board member amongst your board, and you can actually role model and show. And I mentioned earlier on the WEX board, you know, we feel that peer pressure, and it's a positive peer pressure on the expertise in the room, and you don't want to be left behind. So I think that educating yourself is incredibly important. Being inquisitive is, I mean that with your management teams, and asking them, is technology built into your strategic planning? How can technology enable some of those strategic plans either to go bigger or faster? Asking about what use cases, what problems you're trying to solve, and just continually asking questions. And then being supportive is exactly what Melissa just said, which is you also need to encourage innovation. There are technologies that will and won't work, and being supportive of those teams to actually take those chances and recognize that some will and some won't work. But being supportive of what they're trying, I think, is incredibly important.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, Melissa, Andy. This has been a great conversation. You're generous with your time and your expertise and your takeaways. So thank you. And I just also love how they all collaborate and support each other. We are facing some challenges, obviously. Andy opened our eyes to those, but I'm so excited that you wrapped up saying that you continue to be optimistic. So you've got the right attitude to solve these challenges ahead. And using technology to help get us there is a perfect way to do it. So I'm going to turn it back to Kathy.
And thank you, Lisa, for taking it easy on us.
Thanks, Lisa, Steve, Andy, Melissa. This was fabulous. It really was. Having been involved in technology since the late 70s, early 80s, I'm struck by the fact that you're continually going through a little aspect of what you talked about, you know, the change, the degree to which technology is expected to solve problems, the real difficulty when it doesn't, the increasing amount of resources that you have to put on it. I think what's different now is that everybody's talking about that in a way that they didn't at a super high level, at a board level, and it's really a matter of absolute emergency, if you will, that we all get to the point where we can talk about this in an intelligent way and help our institutions make the right decision. So this was, I think people are going to be looking at this, looking up the, you know, when we put this out and make it available for people to see who weren't able to see it tonight, I think there's going to be a lot of interest in it, and even rethinking about it, because you guys have really been phenomenal in sharing your insights, extraordinary insights. So thank you and thank you, Lisa, for great moderating questions. Thank you. What am I? One of my jobs here is to remind you all that the NACD New England program is filling up, and we hope that you will join us at one or more future sessions. So please take a look at the material that you have in front of you, both to get a calendar of upcoming events. And as I forgot to mention earlier, you'll also see a list of our sponsors in there. So if you're looking around to spend some money with somebody, try it with our sponsors. Don't forget the survey. On the screen behind me, yeah, there is a QR code. What do you know? I didn't know whether it actually appeared, but it did. I know. So you can use that QR code, or we will be sending you a little note, so you'll get some information from us too about filling out the survey. We really do pay attention to our surveys, and we try to make our programs as responsive to your needs and thoughts and the way in which all of you would like to see us talk with you about important matters in corporate governance. So thanks everybody for attending. I can't imagine a better place to have this program than this Rue Institute. It's too bad you're 2 hours away from Boston because I'd be here more often. Yeah, I guess when you live in Maine, right? Ellen? Oh, that's right. There is a reception. Probably you knew that, but please join us over there. So thanks, everybody, and all of you, safe travels home.